To run this, the prerequisite I'm going to use as the command prompt. So right click, run as the command prompt as administrator, and point the follow path which we opened earlier, x64. Okay, copy. So just change the directory to d colon. As I said earlier, it's the exe name is prereq, and slash, these are commands. You can refer, these are the commands. Okay, so out of that I'm gonna use a command called slash no GUI, means you don't find the GUI. I'm gonna use this with the slash local. That means it will validate all the required things, but the output is coming, and if you look at the, everything is coming into the command prompt, right? So this also actually creates a log file in my C drive. We go back here, you see here, these are the two logs got created. How best you can easily remember the log file is config.mgr is the name of the product, right? Config.mgr, configuration manager, and the prerequisite, whatever it is there, it is coming up and it is showing in this log, right? Other one would be the config.mgr setup related log, okay, which is again it is running. Okay, so how do you read these log files? The best way would be the reading the logs would be, there is a built-in tool which is available with the CCM. All you have to do is go to the media and setup, under tools you have CM trace. Copy this tool and paste somewhere in your machine. Okay, in my case I'm copying it into my D drive, and it is asking, do you, when I try to open this tool, it is prompting me, hey, do you want to use this tool all the time, any of the file which has an extension of .log. So what happens is a CCM, whenever it is running, okay, you see here it is popping up in a GUI, right? So whatever it is running all the time, the logs are comes as the output as .log. So do you want to associate .log file to be open and can be viewed in this? Yes. Okay, now just close this and see the magic. You go back here, okay, the same tool, and type config.mgr.log. It says that, hey, you want to open with .notepad or configuration manager trace log tool. So I would prefer all the time to be open with the CM trace. We call it as a CM trace in short. So that's why I've taken a checkbox. Click on OK. Now you see here, this is a very good view compared with the notepad, and it gives you the complete information. Okay, this is the actual command what we have used. Okay, for that it is showing me the output. Okay, but if you look at here, the same information is writing into the log, and which I can read into the trace tool from this. Okay, and it says that, hey, WSS is missing, but it's still a warning. It's not a red one. But if you remember, in one of the prerequisites, we also talked about the Microsoft Remote Differential Compression, which is RDC. It's not a role, it is a feature which needs to be installed, right? So that also available, and it is not, since it is not available, it is showing as the error. And if you're lazy to read this, the best advantage would be, as a first step, you can look at here, these all are missing. You see here schema extensions which are related to the Active Directory, which are missing, but still it's a warning. That means yellow items are warning, red is into. Okay, so which you can't proceed further to install. Okay, now as a first step, we will try to resolve the red steps, and then we'll focus on some of the yellow points, and then at the end we would make sure that we get a green. Okay, to begin with, it's still running. Okay, let it run, but let's have a look on it. The first point would be in the red, RDC to be enabled. How do you enable, and where it uses? If I double click that, I get the information. Let it complete. Looks like, okay, the setup prerequisite has been completed. Now let's have a look on it. If you look at what are the things are required, let's try to understand. The first one would be the rate. Let's filter with that. You can't filter, unfortunately, but if you look at the log, it has been generated all this log in the command prompt. Also, you have this log, okay, which is explaining you what all the things are pending. For example, here IAS is not there, bits is not enabled, okay, which is used, and the this is not an error, okay, this is the SQL server is not there, and this machine failed to connect. So all these errors are reported in the log file. But if you look at in the GUI, which is this, the first one would be the Odyssey, and also you can see here IAS should be listed here. Let's Odyssey IAS service is not running. Okay, IAS service running, but if you just double click it, okay, you have selected the IAS as the required and install IAS server to continue to this setup. That means the setup is not there. Okay, if you click on this, it says that, you know, what exactly, I mean, if you double click on each of these error, what are the steps to be followed and how to resolve that. Also it gives you for most of them. For example, here WSUS, it is clearly giving that you need to have at least the WSUS 3.4 version with these two patches to be installed so that it can support the Windows 10 and other versions. In fact, if you read these, but these are the things are available here. So let's what we can do is let's install the few of the things and we can rerun post to that. So let's go to the computer management, that's a server management, I'm sorry, and select the local server because this is a local, and see add in roles and features. Next, and make sure that this is the CM01 and the required roles are IAS at this point of time. That's what we have identified. If you can look into, give me a second, if you look at here the error which is that you need to have the WSS, okay. Also the WS we will install later. I'll tell you why, because it will ask you to show the SQL database, okay, which I don't want to put it on a SQL Express edition or the internal database. Instead of that, we would use the proper standard edition or the enterprise edition, whatever the edition, okay. Let's install this role, okay, WSS, sorry, let's install the IAS role and click on next. And also we need the .NET framework as we talked about it. Let's activate that. Also the ASP.NET. Now if you look at here, this is the features, okay. In the features we need to install all the required. Basically I need to install bits and bits component, compact server, bit server extensions, as well as the RDC. These are the two are available and must be installed as part of my features selection, that is remote differential compression, which is used. These are the things I must have to use, and post to that I can click on next. Just reviewing that once again. You can find the checks here. If you look at here, RDC, okay, which is we have already selected, and click on next. And now the rules selection will come. So here the tricky part comes into the picture, like web dev should be there, and Windows authentication under authentications, and performance, dynamic compression, and IAS. All the extensions must be installed, because as I said earlier, SMS was on IAS 6. It was developed to compatible. Post to that any of the SCCM version as on date recording of 2019 March, all of them are IAS 6. So IAS 6 must be selected as a compatible mode, and then click on install. Post to this you don't have any post configuration other than proceeding further. Let's wait for a second. This visit is completed. I can close here and simply rerun this so that I should resolve at least a few of them. right? At least I'm expecting IS and the bits. Also, I expect the remote differential protocol, which is RDC, not the protocol, compression, which is here. Okay, let's read it. So this takes again the same time. Once it is completed this visit, we get the output. Again, the same thing. If you look at it's going to run the log files. The one more advantage with this tool would be whatever the text is adding to this log, you can still read that. Okay, I mean, you don't need to reopen the file. Okay, say example, the first line was written here, the second line is writing here. You can read right away. That is on read of any line, any text can be written. Whatever it is writing to that log file, you can view it from this log. That's the one more advantage with this tool, which is CMTrace tool. By the way, if you remember in one of the session, in the last session, we also trying to download the SQL 2016, which is almost downloaded. If you remember, if you noticed earlier, this was moving, right? Because these are completed validation and it has moved, and you can see that you can read basically the log files, right? You see the logs are progressing, right? Okay, this has completed the checks, and we can see that clearly now there is no IS related error, right? And there is no remote differential compression related, and RDC error also noted. So it is only pointing now SQL. As also, if you look at here, Windows PE, which we talked about, right? Windows pre-installation environment. If you remember here, WinPE, right? It is showing that in one of our vocabulary. So this also is showing that this is not there because this is part of ADK. So we need to install ADK, which is compatible for Windows 10. Say example, you want to use Windows 10 1610 version. The build version is 1610. So you need to have the ADK which is compatible to that, at least the OS build. So what Microsoft recommends is always go for the latest ADK. That is, as on date, today is an 1809 image, which we are trying to test it, right? So 1809, that means 1810 can be the best ADK which you can download it. So let's download side by side. That also you would see that in an easy way. In fact, you have that link also, right? So you can see here 1809 supported ADK is also available right here. So you can download the ADK for Windows 10 1809 version, and then it's a simple exe file. Again, this exe will ask you to know whether you want to download this. If so, do you want to really download as the complete set of folders? Later point it can be used. So this is almost close to 3 to 4 GB will come up. So it's a 1 GB which is coming up here. So I'm gonna choose that I don't want to install right now. Later point I will install, but the source to be downloaded. So I choose this radio button, and I'll make sure that this should be installed under ADK folder. Okay, so under ADK make sure that we should give the proper, because ADK is always ADK, but we should know what is the version. So ADK, this is 1809. Okay, then this would take some time to download. Okay, and later point we can start the installation of ADK. That would actually resolve this error as well as the USMT. This is also part of ADK. Okay, and deployment tools also ADK. That means at least the 3 of these would go away, including the USMT. So almost three of them would go away if we install ADK, so which is we are trying to download in process. Also, it's talking about the SQL server. So once we have the SQL server is downloaded, okay, since we have already SQL server downloaded, we need to install that SQL server. So for that, what I'm doing is I'm currently copying from my desktop to I want to paste it on my SCCM server so that I no need to insert it. Basically, I'm copying the media since I have downloaded on my local PC. Now I'm moving that media to SCCM server. Once the local media is available, I can straightforward go and install SQL Server on that machine. Then I'll definitely get different errors. You would see in a minute. The SQL Server got installed. Let's double click that. I'm sorry, the SQL Server media is copied. Let's install. So this is the installation, a straightforward installation, which I'm going to do. Click on install the new server as a standalone. Remember that you need to have the SQL Server database, as well as you need to have the reporting services, and the reporting services are used for your reporting purpose, right? So I'm going to use the free evolution copy. Then I accept. Says that it's good. It will verify with the Microsoft setup update. If you look at it is pointing me to configure the SQL ports. So I need to configure the SQL ports. Let's go to control panel. If I don't configure the ports, I would definitely get an error. Let it install the SQL Server, and we will get here the error like 4022 port should be open in the firewall. That's what the error I get it. Okay, so here that's what we wanted to see. Okay, let's install this, and we can configure this later point also. Remember that point. And now we simply choose the database engine and the reporting services, nothing else. Okay, and now the installation, where do you want to install? So I want to install this complete installation to my D drive, not on C drive, for example. In fact, we are going to do one more installation with a proper cache, primary, secondary, and we also do the migration. And then we separate the SQL Server database to separate server, and we go for SQL Server standardization like tempdb configuration to a separate folder altogether, and the database size limiting. All that configuration are the best practices which are required for the SQL Server installation. We would definitely follow that, but for now I'm going to show you to make you that whatever you have learned as of now with the vocabulary, just to make you aware how the tool looks like. Post to that, I would go into the in-depth with the more real world problems and more real world challenges. So if you want, here you can choose even the client connectivity tools. That all depends on what we wanted, in fact. Okay, and if you want SDK backward compatibility, these can be taken up. Now I've taken this and the reporting services. Click on next. That would enough for the SQL Server. And the default instance name, if you remember, we can use a default instance name. Click on next. This is a very interesting one. Okay, and I want an error, okay, which should happen when we run this. Okay, I'm gonna get an error because it's not recommended that SQL Server database to be run on MS SQL. It should run with another account, which is as a best practices. We are gonna get an error in a minute, but for now let it continue as it is. But remember that there is another very important one. which is a collation. Collation is a mandatory one. This must be, you continue to rectify. You can rectify later point, but you need to run again collation changing commands with the SQL CMD or SQL commands. That takes a lot of other investigation. So make sure that the default one which is compatible is this CP1 CIAS, which is Latin 1 underscore general. This is a collision. Collision is like, you think that uh, there is a columns and rows and whatever the values you can fit it, that is restricts based on some kind of collision, like Latin language example you take as a Latin expressions can be fitted example in that, and you can't fit it maybe Chinese characters, so that you are actually telling before you installing the SQL server, so that it prepares in that way of the database and the tables, rows and columns. That's why it is very important that you can't change later point. You can change it in fact by running another command, but it's recommended that you should be using this collation and don't change this. And here, as I said, I'm gonna get error in a minute. For now I'll just continue, and remember that you can take this checkbox and now continue. And now here it would prompt you to add the default account, which is my administrator account. I'm also making that as the full level configuration, that is the SQL admin. Okay, click on next. Here you can configure the temp db, all that parameters. In fact, you can give a separate directory, separate folder with the best practices that you can follow. Now I'm going to install SQL Server reporting services with native. There's no changes. So let's see, there are the two errors which we wanted to get it. If you are following the default installation, one would be the SQL services running status. Okay, other one would be the Windows firewall ports related. Okay, so these two errors we are expecting opposed to this installation, but we would resolve few of the issues, at least in the SQL related, right? If I look at Windows Assessment and Deployment Kit, which is AGK, it has downloaded successfully into d:/ADK Windows 10 1809 folder. So I'm just closing that. Post SQL installation, I'm going to do that so that I would fix almost all the errors except WSS as well as the schema. These are the two would remain, if I'm correct. Yeah, and with the AD schema. So these three need to be fixed. Yeah, schema is nothing but this. Both are the same almost. We're going to fix in one shot the schema and Active Directory permissions for that container. If you look at here, it is saying that you don't have a permissions for a container called systems management, which we're going to do it post ADK installation. Let's fix as first SQL, then we move to ADK, then we would fix for Active Directory, then we get it everything as a green. Okay, still the installation is going on. Yeah, finally we got the installation SQL Server and everything got success. So I'll just close this and close this. So the SQL thread has closed. Now if I run it, I should not get SQL related errors, but I'm sure that we talked about the port as well as the service related errors we may get it. For example, here we are getting already, which is SQL Server running account must be configured to some other, which we will get it, and that we would fixed in a minute. In the meantime, we can also the SQL, we also get the SQL memory allocation, which is by default SQL consumes unlimited of memory, so that must be resolved. Okay, to do that you need to connect to the SQL Server. To do that you need to have the SQL Management Studio, which doesn't install by default. Okay, you need to install that as separate. If you look at here, there's no Studio Management, Visual Studio Management, or the SQL Studio Management. What I have to do is I have to go here, for example, SQL Setup, and then if I click on that, a specific tool, for example, Installation Tools, I get it here, or I can type SQL Management Studio. Yeah, this one. So if I click on the this option, it will take to Microsoft site where I need to download that um, SQL Management Studio, which is available here, which it doesn't allow me to download here. So I would uh, copy the link. Yeah, I'm gonna download here anyway. It is allowed me after adding to the trusted site. Once the installation, once the download is completed, I need to install this so that I can connect to SQL Server and configure my memory management. You look at here, it says that the SQL Server is not configured, and you have only 8 GB, so it needs to be have at least the 8 GB minimum configuration dedicated for SQL Server. Okay, and also we also get a different error like the memory utilization was set to maximum limit. That has to be set it. We would fix once we have downloaded the studio management. And also, yeah, that's two errors. It's not reported any other error, but what happens is while installation of a CCM, it will ask you to create a firewall policy. During that time, we would definitely create that firewall port which are required for SQL ports to be allowed on a CCM server. Otherwise, you would get an error. Okay. Now, for now, other problem would be the SQL service running account. So if you look at here, the logon account for the SQL server service cannot be a local user account because or the local service, you must have to configure service to use a valid domain account. Like network account or some other account. It can't be a SQL service name. That means if I go to services.msc, okay, let me open the services.msc from administrative tools, and you can see here SQL server service. Okay, so which is maximize, type SQL. Okay, so this SQL server service must not be on MS SQL server. Either it should be on a local, which is not recommended again, or you need to create a domain account, and that domain account should have a permission on this. So in my case, I'm gonna use a local system account, which is not recommended in fact, but I'm gonna use this just for the demo purpose. Okay, in the production, what you do is you create an Active Directory. Okay, here under users and computers, Active Directory users and computers, I would have to create a user account here, and that user account to be mapped here for the service. Okay, like browsing, and then give that user account. Oh, who can, for example, this account, he should be able to start that, but it's not the Active Directory account. But if you look at here dot, which is local, that means, so I should locate this as to the entire directory, and then browse, find now. So here if I created another account, I can do that. Okay, this kind of configuration we would normally do it very well in the production. For now, I'm not going to touch up this, but for sure in the next installations we are going to do that. Okay, for now it's a straightforward, and when you apply it, you need to restart the SQL services, otherwise it won't affect. Okay, now the SQL services is reconfigured. Now if you go back and recheck this tool, this has fixed. Okay, and we also have the SQL installation, which is SQL Studio Management. Let's install. In the meantime, we can run and see, this problem will go off. Let's rerun. In the meantime, it's going to download and install that package. Now if you look at the problem, since we reran this, the SQL Server service related error was not there. Okay, now only we have the warnings which are related to the SQL memory allocation and one is the set at least minimum 8 GB, and then remove the maximum limit, which is set it to 2 TB. If we locate in a minute after connecting to this SQL Studio Management, we can resolve these two problems, right? And what well pending? The pending one would be the errors which are related to ADK, which we are gonna fix it in a minute uh, post the Management Studio configuration related to memory. Okay, it has installed SQL Management Studio and it is requesting for a reboot, unfortunately. But I'm not going to reboot this for a minute, and I can still able to connect it, because if I start again rebooting, it would take some time. Let's connect it without reboot and fix these two problems. SQL memory allocation. If you look at here, it is reserved minimum of 8 GB that has to be set it. Okay, and for the 4 GB for the secondary side to be set it. Okay, so in our case, it's our server and Windows authentication should be enabled. And if you look at, these are the default databases. There's no other database which has created at this point of time. And go to the properties, and the most interesting things will be you can find here. So the minimum is 0, that is 0 MB, and the maximum is 2 TB. So this error, okay, the error which is, let me open up this error, memory allocation, which is set to maximum is 2 TB, which is set. It shouldn't be in that case, so I'm gonna set as 10 GB, 1001, that's a 10 GB, and the minimum to I fix this, maximum I set it to 10 GB in my case, and the minimum is it is recommending as 8 GB. So let's put that 1 2 3, yeah, 1000, 8000. Now if I set it, okay, these two should go away, but I need to restart the services to take effect of that. So right click and start. Either I can do it here, or I can restart this service. Okay, if you look at here, the service also can be restarted. It's all up to us. In fact, it's restarted already. Now if I rerun this too, I'll clear these two errors. Now we'll have only ADK related error. Let's browse that. Where is ADK? ADK got downloaded. If I'm correct, it should be under downloads. Yeah, and D drive. I'm sorry, it was in D drive. ADK 1810. Now we're going to install that. Before that, let's see. Oh, still it is showing that. Unfortunately, one got resolved the problem, but other one is still showing. Let's read that. Configuration manager requires a reserve of minimum 8 GB of memory. So we set it, in fact. So let's have a look on it. Checking the memory allocations. If you remember, the 8 GB means not 8000, right? So I need to configure 8024. So anything at 024 should be okay. Like, you need to open calculator. 1024 into 8. So this should be the actual value. Okay, and if you look at the log file, it says at 8 GB gigabytes. So anything on this, I'm sorry, I clicked something, anything above this should be acceptable. And let's restart the service once again. In the production, it may not be exactly 8 GB. You would configure more. For example, you have 120 GB, then you would maybe configure maybe 32 GB as minimum, and then depends on other configurations, you might change it. Now there's no SQL related error, it's all about ADK. Now this problem is resolved, the SQL related memory. Now all is pending is the ADK. So if you look at here, ADK is required. This is also ADK. This is also ADK. Like PE is Windows PE, a pre-execution environment. related, and USMT is the user state migration tool, which is part of ADK again, and deployment services, which are used for your boot images. All those things comes under deployment services, which are again part of ADK. Now I'm gonna install ADK. Let's go back here and set up ADK. Since we have already downloaded, we can say that it can install in C program files, and click on next. Here, what are the options you need to choose? If you're unsure if you choose any of them, I mean most of them, that also works fine. But there are a few things that are required, especially for example here I don't want API sequencer, because this is not going to be a sequencer. Sequencing API is the application virtualization. In fact, we're gonna distribute few of the applications with the API also as part of the course. And UAV, which is this, also not required. User virtualization, in fact, user experience virtualization. Performance tools are required, XPerf, and volume activation is not required. USMT, this is the tool, and configuration designer, as well as the ICD and deployment tools. These are core and it is required as part of your installations. So total we have selected 5 different tools. Remember that as in recording on March 28, 2019, these are the tools are visible. Tomorrow if Microsoft releases any other tools, might be visible here. Okay, let's click on install. This would take a very few minutes to complete the complete installation. While it is getting installed, when you're talking about if we talk about the SCCM server 1 version to another version upgrade, we also talk about the ADK installation. So that means the ADK, if they have today in the market 1809, that is 2009 9th month build is available, and you wanna go for 1909 for example build, then you need to upgrade your ADK also. As a first step, what we do is we uninstall and then install the ADK, then only we upgrade our SCCM infrastructure. Okay, that's a different process. We would definitely go through it as part of the migration, in fact. Okay, so I'll just close this, and if I rerun this, I should go off these 3 of them. Okay, let's run. Okay, we got an error still, as PE is required. In fact, we have already installed. I think it might require a reboot. So what I'll do is I'll simply cancel this and rerun later point, but I want to give a reboot. Okay, let's close this, everything. This ran and we got an error stating P is not found. In fact, we installed everything, still we got an error because it's as simple as that. We used 1809 build, but our SCCM is 1802. You look at the difference between 1802 to 1809 ADK, it's not really compatible. So what I have to do is, at this point of time, I have to go back and uninstall the ADK. Okay, and download ADK which is compatible for 1802, so which is nothing but 1803. So I'm just downloading that here by downloading. Just started the downloading process. Once the downloading is completed, I will again do the reinstallation, that is a complete installation of ADK, which is 1803 based. The reason is 1809 ADK is not compatible for 1802 SCCM. Okay, so that's what the problem. So 1803 got downloaded. Now let's install 1803. We have already installed 1809. I'm sorry, I have to show you. It was very quick. Install. Yes. Here I don't need API sequences, and user experience can be there, UUB. That's it. Once these are installed, I should rerun this and this should go off. So this is very useful when you are trying to run pre-request checks, so that in fact this also runs when you are trying to install SCCM. at the end of your all the inputs, the same pop-up comes up and says that, hey, you don't have these, and you have to install. So what we are trying to do is, before we install a SCCM server, we are ourselves trying to fix all these problems. That's it. That's what we are trying to do. So the basic is here. We try to install ADK 1809, which is not compatible for a SCCM version of 1802. So all I have to do is I have to uninstall 1809 and install 1803, which is compatible, the closest version, right? If you see 1802 and 1803, always one version will be higher, is supported. So ADK uninstall 1809 version with 1803, that's a March 2018 version, should be available, should install, and then our SCCM pre-checks against to this version can support. Post to that, whenever we are getting when we are going for the higher level of SCCM, we will upgrade even ADK and SCCM server. That's how it works. So I just uninstall the ADK, and now I'm also installing the 1803. It just got installed, and now we can rerun this. Okay, now the error gone. So that means the 1803 is required for 1802 SCCM, right? If you are going for the higher end, you also need a similar SCCM version. So what if you have to do is, for example, if you are trying to install 1802, that means the one version of higher would be okay, but can't go for 1809 at this point of time, because you need to go when the SCCM version and the ADK also almost in a compatible position, right? So that to be done. Anyway, now just to continue further, now we have WSS to be installed. So here the question would be like, if you're planning to install WSS server, or I'm sorry, if you're planning to install SCCM as a primary site, you need to install at least the WSS console. Okay, so what I have to do is, I mean, if you're not using a patch management, you at least need to have WSS console. That's a pre-requirement. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to install WSS also on the same machine. So I just go back here, WSS, take the checkbox and install straightforward. Yeah. So now for the SQL connectivity, I can't install. You know why? Because it's already installed the SQL server. You have the SQL on the same machine, so you can't have this. So post to this, you will get a wizard where you need to configure the SQL. So that's why you can't do it. So I'll simply remove this checkbox, which is Windows Internal Database Connectivity. Then I should be able to install the SQL. When I choose this, I get here a wizard, which I'm gonna do it. Okay, I'm not gonna choose an internal database, which is a limitation again. That's why I wanted a proper one. Here it is asking me to give the path where you wanna put it the updates. Normally I always go to WSS folder. This is your WSS content. The downloads goes to this folder. Give this folder. DB instance is the same server which you have here. Okay, successfully connected. If you look at, I know that means the local machine. Okay, and say next. And if you have the remote SQL server, then you have to enter the machine name and the instance name. In this case, successfully connected to the server because it's a local. Okay, if really needed, it can restart, but it doesn't require any restart. In fact, install. This gets installed a few of these additional components also. 4.7 .NET and IS API filters. Along with that, WSS also gets installed. This might take another 2-3 minutes. Yeah, it has installed, and if you see here, there is a post-launch task to be executed, and also you have here a yellow mark. So let's close this and click on this yellow mark and say launch post installation task, which is nothing but the connectivity between your WSS server and the SQL. Okay, that's a wizard which is gonna start now. Okay, it says that it's failed. Might require reboot, looks like. So let's close this and we'll give a reboot. Before that, let's run it. You would find here now only for the schema and as well as that known error of SQL memory. Yeah, this is also both are related to the schema, which I'm going to talk as the last option. So anyway, now the WSS warning is gone, but I still have to run that wizard. So what I'll do is I'll cancel this and simply close, and I'll rerun that by restarting my computer. So I have to wait, or what I can do is I can do a continuous ping to this IP. It should be ready. Let's connect it to a system server. I can read in the check. I'm sorry, instead of the rerun, I need to run this. Still it's failing. That's fine. Okay, we will fix this later point of time. Okay, now for now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna continue with the installation. Let's rerun the configuration manager related. That can be fixed later point. We just need the console, WSS console. Since we have it, it's not asking any, it's not throwing any errors. Let's go back to D drive, config mgr, setup bin 64, and 2 times tab / local. You get this. So this time you are getting only 2 errors, which are schema, and one is schema extensions. Other one would be the publishing the container. So for that you need to grant the permissions. So total 2 errors which are visible. Okay, and the SQL server is we can ignore it because it looks like some kind of error within that tool, but nothing nothing wrong. We have already done the proper memory allocation, right? So only 3. In fact, we can continue for the installation also without these warnings by ignoring, but it's not good. Let's fix that. Okay, now let's talk about what is schema. Schema is comes under Active Directory. Let's go to the Active Directory. What exactly is schema? I put it in a different way. Everybody puts in a gives different examples, but I put it for you in an easy way to understand. Schema is it has the attributes. Okay, so example here I'll take example of the guest user. Okay, one user. So for the user, what we are trying to do is we are setting a first name, initials, last name, right? If you take these 3, these are the 3 fields, but if you look at in the front of each field, there is something called first name or some field, some name, right? That can't be changed, right? So what happened is these names are hard coded inside your schema. Okay, and that gives the structure for this user properties. Okay, that means the property has some values can be hold. Okay, that has already defined in such a way it must to be in this way. Okay, for example here maybe I don't have a pager information. If I want a pager information, what I have to do, I have to open my schema, which is your heart. In fact, the heart of Active Directory we call it sometime. Okay, so in AD we will edit that schema. We type here page number and give a blank. Okay, we fill that value so that it actually visible for the properties of that specific object. Okay, that's called schema. So let's have a look at it, how to view that. For that, the best place would be the either ADS edit. Okay, the first one would be the ADS edit. Let's open this and say connect. Default, you don't need to enter anything. Make sure that it is your pointing to your local LDAP server, which is nothing but your Active Directory server. Click OK, and then simply double click to browse your domain, and you see here for example the same user. If you take it, if I go to the properties, there are different values. Like this is the field which is written in the schema. Okay, if you have the schema editor, you can write here these values. Okay, and then the values can be set. Okay, so the values are to set it ADSI edit would be useful to filter out and find out what are the values was set. For example, here this value was set already, and you can't change this value because of the schema. That's how it was designed. Whereas some of the values can be changed, some of them can't be changed. Okay, now now come to the point. Actually, the actual point would be the if you look at the schema extensions, what happens is you're gonna extend the schema which is related to the SCCM. That means SCCM gonna here create a container, something called here, if you go to the new and object, and the object type would be a container. This is how you have to create. Okay, so if you just little bit go down container, okay, just the container ABC CCC container, right? Yeah, this is a container, and go to the container and type system management. Okay, this is the name it was looking. So this was not set by me, it is set by Microsoft. You need to extend the schema, and then the values will be available. Why do we need to extend schema? I'm going to talk in a minute. It's not mandatory to extend the schema, but yes, it is recommended to extend schema. Okay, now what we are doing is we are creating a new container within the Active Directory. What would happen? So before I click on finish, what would happen is if I open here and say refresh, I don't see anything. But if you just go to the view and take advanced features, you would see other values which are hidden. Okay, and if you see here, system is there, but there's nothing called system management under this, right? There's no PQRS. S value was not there, right? So what we're going to do is we are gonna create a value under system, like new object. It's a container, and the name as system management. So this is where we are going to create a system management. There is a container under system, right? So now if I do a refresh here, that object will populate it, right? It's populated. In fact, I can't create from here that container. Okay, I need to use only the tool called ADSI edit, or if you know LDIF, a programming or a text file based one. Okay, if you know that, you can use that method to edit this schema, but the easiest method I would say is this. So let's practice this. And the system management we have created. Now once this is available, okay, SCCM will publish some values. Okay, it will put some values. Okay, what kind of values it will put it, and why it is needed to extend the schema, I'm going to talk now. So before going into this, let's have a look on the schema extension related files. Okay, let's go back to the SCCM server, and here under bin, okay, you can go for extend 80. This is the file. Okay, this exe file, if you just copy to your domain controller, okay, I'm just copying to maybe to a folder or to the root of the C. Okay, and what happens is it is gonna, if I basically the step would be very straightforward. You need to execute this exe. That's it, that's a step. But what happens after executing this step, okay, that I'm going to talk now. Let's open up a command prompt before we execute. Okay, administrator, and just say, what's the tool name? It is extending AD schema, right? The easiest way to remember the tool name is EX stands for extending, right? And then if you see the extending, right, EXT, and then AD stands for Active Directory, and you're going to do schema, right? So that's it. That's the name of the exe. And more important one would be the either interview question or maybe to review the log file. You need to know the log file name. The log also gets generated in the C drive wherever you run from any of the folder, doesn't matter, but it generates a log file with the same name of the exe in C drive, and this must be executed by your schema admins. That means a user who has these permissions. Let's go and check a sample user administrator. You must be member of schema admins. Okay, so whoever the members are available in this group in your company, they can only do the schema extension. Okay, that's how it works. Let's execute this. What will happen? I have not talked why we need to use and what is going to be put inside the system management container. We just created a container, but we have not done anything. Think that it's going to be a folder and SCCM. Once we execute this exe file, it's going to create inside this something, some values, a kind of framework. Let's give you one more time example, like first name, a last name. These are the values which can't be changed. Very similar to that, it's gonna create an under system management container, which we may or may not be visible. In fact, we don't see it right away, but when you put a value, we will able to see. Okay, so let's execute that. Okay, yeah, it need definitely DLL file. So what I'm gonna do is these are the DLLs are needed, so I'm gonna copy that DLLs also. To do that, simply I need to take these two, okay, files. This is also one file which is talking about extension, extending schema. Copy this file, also should be there in the C drive, so wherever you are executing. Or I can, what I can do is I can simply map, even if I need, simply, or right click. Let's do it. Copy the files. The other file would be the ms, if I'm correct. This is a file. Okay, this file needed one of the file mssvr, I think 120 DLL. This is msvcr. Also one more file, it was talking about the let's execute one more time and see if it was mfc. So mfc. So these are the files you would definitely need. So let's paste it. So who is gonna do this? So the person who is gonna do is a schema admin. This is the highest level admins within your Active Directory. It's not part of your job, but it would be done by Active Directory guys who's gonna execute this. It's not part of our SCCM role, but yeah, in fact, if you are the admin, you have to do it. Simply execute this exe. Okay, what happened? You don't get it anything on the screen other than just successfully extended. And if you go straight forward, okay, and rerun this, it simply says that schema extensions are no more as a warning. Okay, it goes away. You see this? But the problem, other one would be the site permissions are still not available, right? So let's have a look on it, what it has done. If we want to know what it has done, simply open up the log file which was generated on the same name, with the same name, right? With the exe, and the log file remains the same. I like to open in a notepad format instead trace format, because this is only the 20 lines close to 30 lines, in fact. Okay, if you look at here, what happened is it's just modifying Active Directory schema for SMS, which is SMS is the old name of SCCM, so it is still hard coded as SMS only. Okay, it's connected to my domain name called AUM neo .local, and it has created under system management something called SMS hyphen site code. Okay, and boundaries, roaming, all these close to 16 12 different values got created. So what will happen? Say example, there is a client, okay? The client, as we discussed earlier also in one of the slide, the client always communicate with by using SMS site code. So to know the site code, to find that site code, what is the site which I have to report as a client? If client itself asks, it will query to Active Directory, okay, and in the Active Directory it will go to the system management folder, which is a container, okay, and here it simply goes here, and it has a programming skill, because the SCCM client itself has a capability to directly point to Active Directory here, to this container, and it will read. So what it does read, it will read all these values, okay, whatever the value it is required. For example, it wants to know about the boundary and the boundary group, or the IP address range, or IP address, or the management point name, or the content location name, or the site code. Everything it will be pulled from here, okay. That's where it is needed, the schema extension. What if you don't want a schema extension? How do you manage? How would the client will manage? You need to create a records in WINS. Okay, WINS is the naming resolution. That's where you have to create a specific records, so that you will manage the naming resolution and the site code related, and the content related management can be done out of that WINS server, okay. But now a client, when it is part of Active Directory, mostly 99.49's client will be part of Active Directory, then it will query to this and you will get it. But as I said earlier, these are all created, but you can't see here directly. You can't see directly here. Why? Because it's a template which is already available. Now when you onboard your SCCM server, it will fill all these values. It's an example. It says that ms-scm- site hyphen, what is the site code you're going to give? So while the installation, you have to give a site code, right? That site code information, like alphanumerical number which we talked about, like PO1, or maybe if you're installing in India, you may give as INT, okay. If it is a London site, LON, okay. So that value you would give here, that gets filled here, okay. That only when you onboard or when you install your SCCM server, then only it gets filled and you can able to see here. Until then you can't see anything here. I'm sorry for that, okay. That's so what we have done so far. We have done only one step, that is the schema extension, but we have not yet granted a permissions, okay, for SCCM server to come and fulfill that template. So earlier what we talked is, last few seconds back, we have created a template is readily available here. Now SCCM server, once it is installed, or once you onboarded your SCCM server, it has to come and it has to fill the values, right? The values has to be filled. So to fill that values, you need to have a permissions. So who should have the permission? The permission should have, for SCCM server as a computer, it should have a permission. So what we do is, in our companies, normally we create an Active Directory group. Okay, let's go to the Active Directory. In this, for example, India, okay, I have a groups example. So under global groups, I'm going to create a group called SCCM servers. So this server is a group type is a global, okay, GG, and security. And for this group, what I'm going to do is, I'm going to add my SCCM server. I have to choose as the object type as a computer, because I'm targeting a computer name. So I'll simply find, because I have only 3 computers, so easy. This is my SCCM server. I'll say this is my server, okay. That means in this group, so in production you may have more than one SCCM server, right? So all the servers you would be adding to one single AD group, okay. And once you add it here, what happens is, we would go to the system and system management here, and we add here, we grant that group, to that group, the permissions. Why we need to grant the permissions? If you don't grant the permissions, what would happen? Template is available, but SCCM server, it knows that it has to go and fill the template which is available under system management container, but it doesn't have a permissions. What if you don't have a permissions, you definitely can't feed that fill that values, and definitely once the if the values are not populated, no use, right? The client can't use that SCCM servers. So that's what it is telling here. If you look at here, so this is what your site server, when I said, in the vocabulary, if you remember, either site server or site system, for now I told that time, think that just the SCCM server. Okay, that's what I told. If you can revise back that session, and think that that doesn't have a permission, okay, uh, to write permissions under system management container. Okay, so you have to grant that. Okay, you have to grant, and these are the steps which are given. Okay, so whatever we have performed the steps, these are the same steps which are given in this link. Okay, let's go back here and go to the properties of that container, go to the security and advanced. Okay, now to the add here, see here, add, and now set a principal, which is our AD group called SCCM service. I'll just give SCCM underscore server service. Okay, so this group, what we have to do is we have to grant full permissions. Okay, to whom? To this object, which is this, and inside any of the child object also. So it's going to create a child object, right? For that also you need to grant as a full permission. That's the key here. Permissions are fully granted for this specific container. Okay, and that's it. Okay, once you have granted, click OK, and now click apply. Make sure that if you look at here, SCCM service, it's a full, and the inherit option was we are not selecting, but the most important one would be the apply to. Okay, apply to this object and descending whatever the child objects also. Click apply. Okay, then automatically it will populate it here, that value also with here. All the checkboxes would be populated. Maybe you're thinking that I want to add here directly, but don't do that. Okay, you have to do it from the advanced and add and the principal. Okay, this is the right way of doing. If you do in that way, you still get an error. Okay, I have to click on OK. Now what happens is, now we have granted permissions, so we extended schema. Okay, so that the client will query to that system management. If the template has already filled, it will use that values to find nearest resources, and it works based on that. Okay, now if it is a server, what happens is, when a server gets installed, it will go to the system management folder. It looks basically for that system management as a container. If not found, it try to create it but doesn't have a permissions. Okay, now what to be done, we have to create a system management container, and then on top of it we need to grant the permission. So that's what we have done now. So we have a full permission. So as a next step, if I rerun this, it should it should clear this warning. But sometimes what happens is, this only gets affected if you log off and log in fact. Okay, so I'm just gonna rerun this. As I said, it's not working, so all I have to do is I have to cancel and log off and log in. So I can say cancel, close, log off and log in, because the group membership doesn't affect unless you actually log off and log in. So sign out. Okay, a new Kerberos ticket to be generated. That is when you log in, it automatically generates an Active Directory. And now I need to go back to the same path and run it. So d:, let's open up quickly. Local. So this time it shouldn't show anything. By the way, we have done many times this prereqs. So what would happen is, normally it's still not showing the permissions, but as many times as you do, what happens is it actually generates every time the log file, and this file size changes all the time. Okay, it's still not showing, so let's give some time or reboot the computer. In my case, I'm gonna reboot this PC. This is the SCCM server, and this is the IP of my computer, SCCM server. Once it's timed out and started responding, I should be able to RDP to the PC. So let's run the tool. This time it should resolve all the permissions problems to these systems into container. Let's open the container also. In fact, yeah, it's not coming up, so it has passed that. Yeah, you can see here SQL Server processing memory allocation, which is the only one we have the error. So this concludes how to fix any of the problems. In fact, I've not done straightforward installations, right? I love to have a lot of problems for each of the pre-requirements so that I remember which component I'm trying to install and where all it is getting applied. Okay, this is the one of the useful pre-requirements method. When you're trying to learn, you can do this. Otherwise, if you are the admin, I mean, if you're the uh, already have SCCM knowledge, what you can do is maybe you can go to the SCCM pre-request checker. Okay, there are multiple tools are available in TechNet Gallery. You can download here one of the tool like this tool, and it does automatically installs, and all you have to do is the show the source of the file, and then automatically does the installation, and it is latestly up to date with all kind of ADKs and the required version. We don't have to face all these problems what we have done for 1 hour 12 minutes as of now. Okay, so everything it goes very smooth. All you have to do is just to show the source of each of these things. That's it. Okay, and like these tools, there are many of them, and the PowerShell commands are available to install. Many things are available, but honestly, when you try to install for the first time by taking a lot of efforts, that would really helps you to learn a lot. Thank you for watching this. I'll close this. In the next session we are going to install it as CCM. Thank you.